One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
We've got rumors, news, question mark around Jaden Rashada. Florida recruiting also trending down. Garrett Riley cashes in with the Clemson Tigers, and we've got our way too early top 25 for the 2023 season. Hello, everybody. Welcome inside the Three Technique, a college football podcast. At the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, I'm Mitch Mason with Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney. Fellas, a lot going on. Just because we've reached the off season does not mean that anything here slows down. College football is a 24/7, 365 type of sport. And, we're going to cover some rumors, some news, obviously our top 25s. What are you guys kind of looking forward to as we start the off season?
Man, it never sleeps, right? As Josh Pate would say, there is no off season. That's for the casuals. We're not casuals around here. We're really excited to see just the rest of this stuff unfold. Look, with the transfer portal, with another signing day coming up, with players, coaches, all kinds of people constantly on the move. So much to look into, so much to consider, and it's really going to be fun, I think, to look back on this season, see what we were right about, see what we were really, really wrong about, and just kind of have some laughs at our own expense too.
Yeah, for sure. Laughs at our own expense. No, I mean, the 22 season just ended. It's not like it's, all over. We get to go back and reflect. We get to rank teams for next year. And then, before too long, it'll be spring games and we can start speculating over why your spring game means that your team's going to win the Natty and why your rival spring game means that they're going to go 0-12 and, lose to everybody, even Kansas, which isn't so much of an insult anymore. But yeah, no, I'm really pumped to see what we can do through the off season. And I'm excited with all these storylines because, we're just a few days out from the Natty and already some pretty big bombshells dropping and some massive shifts just in terms of people switching places and locations and stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot going on, and we are the hub to keep up with all of it. Follow us on our Instagram and our Twitter at 3TechPod. You can also watch the show on YouTube. We're going to be producing some YouTube exclusive content over there during the off season as well. The one programming note that I have, and after we talked about it, basically the regularly scheduled uploads this off season will go to one episode a week, and you can get that on Monday morning. Now, that does not mean that there will only be one episode a week throughout the off season. As I've referenced before, I'm kind of going out and building a network of experts, recruiting analysts, beat writers who we plan on interviewing, and those interviews will be kind of the supplemental episodes throughout the week. So most weeks you should have 2 episodes to listen to and then content over on YouTube as well. But with it being the off season and not having to preview and recap, we just thought, let's go ahead and go to one regular upload a week, and then we'll let you know when more are coming out. So again, another reason to follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. We're about to hit 100 followers on Instagram. I'd love to get to that benchmark. So if you would go over there and follow us, and then the YouTube channel would love some new followers, new subscribers as well. But guys, let's get into it for tonight's episode. Jaden Rashada, he kind of took the college football world by storm yesterday as we're recording this. Reportedly asking for release from his national letter of intent. Now, his dad came out and said that's not true, and then almost walked that back when he said, and I quote, "We're working through some things with Florida," end quote. Now, the rumor that I put out a call for cross-reference and still have not seen anything, I believe, anybody I trust saying this. But the rumor is that Rashada was promised $13 million by a Florida Gators collective, and reportedly they came up with less than a third of that up front. Whether any of this is true, whether none of that is true, is up for debate. But guys, when there's so many rumors and so little fact being out there, you've got to think this only really casts some doubt on Billy Napier and kind of the consistency within the Florida program.
Man, it's yeah. I have no idea how this saga is going to end up for Florida. Certainly doesn't make them look very good to to fans in general, to recruits parents. To I don't know how you listen to a recruiting pitch if you're a 2024 kid, especially from the NIL collectives that are helping out Florida, and just think how do you hear that with any confidence now that you see the prize player in this 2023 class holding out? And I think it's funny. It reminds me of like a NFL training camp holdout, and I think this is our
Hmm.
first, at least our first high profile one. I think there were rumors that Jordan Addison was maybe
Right.
reconsidering USC. If you guys remember that, the NIL was starting to fall through maybe for USC, but that didn't materialize. But this is our first high profile actual holdout from an NFL, or sorry, it sounds like an NFL thing that we're
Yeah.
talking about, but an NCAA player. So I'm just fascinated by this. I don't really have a take. I don't really have a, deep thought. I highly doubt that he's been offered 13 million. I highly, highly doubt that. But who knows? And I'm just fascinated by it. No real take from me.
Well, and in today's day and age with NIL, I mean, 13 million could just be a rumor and a fake made up number by, some, grocery store item like sliced bread. But, I just kind of don't think it matters at this point. We're just going to run with this narrative. And then, a few years, we're going to talk about, oh, remember that Florida quarterback who got like 15 million? And we're just going to keep, kind of inflating the number because as time goes on, that's just what happens, right? The rumors get weirder and facts get less clear. So
Every
it kind
year
of
we'll
almost
add
doesn't
another
matter.
million. Exactly.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter if it's true or not because that's what people want to talk about nowadays. And this is going to kind of continue to flood the problem with what I think we're doing with NIL right now, which is these fake numbers may get thrown out there, but then for the guys underneath them, in the class underneath them, they're going to have to be thinking like, oh, well, if, Rashada got 13 million, then I should be looking for 20 million because I'm the number one guy in my class. So why shouldn't, Ohio State or Georgia or someone like that pay me this much to show up? And then it's just going to crush expectations, crush reality. Or the worst thing is that some of these programs are actually going to find a way to keep up with that. And they're going to bankrupt themselves on, 17 and 18-year-old kids who haven't proven anything at the college level yet.
I'm gonna make, I don't know if it's a bold prediction, maybe it's just a lukewarm prediction, maybe nobody finds it spicy at all. I think these kind of rumors and these missteps, if indeed it is a misstep by the Gators collective, I think this will be the death of the NCAA. And here's what I mean by that. The NCAA declared open season when they were peer pressured into finally making name, image, and likeness a legal thing. Now that they've done that without any oversight, without any guidelines, without any sort of enforcement to stop tampering, to stop, essentially illegal wagering on these players, and now that you potentially have the highest profile high schoolers in this game, the most talked about individuals in this sport, even more so than guys that just won a national championship for the University of Georgia, now that you have them in the middle of chaos, confusion, rumor, and eventually there will be lawsuits over this, the NCAA has gone past the point of no return. There's no way that they can credibly now put in place regulation, some sort of guidelines, a rule book with which situations like these are governed. And because of that, I think you're going to formally have the NCAA's head called for by the governing bodies of the sport. You're either going to move to a pod system where each conference has a governing body, or you're going to have some sort of new conglomerate made up of different aspects of these conferences. But the NCAA, as it stands, in my opinion, will cease to exist sooner rather than later. I mean, if you guys agree with me, would it shock you to see that the NCAA is replaced, overthrown, dissolved within the next 3 years?
I mean, they've been a dead man walking for a little bit, right? They haven't had really any enforcement. You can go back to, looking at some of the teams that get hit with a penalty or they discover something about this team and something they're doing wrong, and then they just, slap on the wrist or, don't do anything about it. I'm thinking maybe like an LSU where, I don't even know if they've officially been sanctioned or if I don't even know if a slap on the wrist is descriptive of what LSU has gotten for that whole hospital situation. But I don't know. I kind of think, the NCAA, they haven't really had any power for a little while. They haven't really been able to do anything. And kind of like what you were saying, they got forced into it. So I honestly don't even think they cared to regulate it in the first place. I think they said, fine, go ahead, have your money. I don't care. Figure it out. And they were perfectly willing and, perfectly fine to watch the whole thing go, up in flames almost so they could go and say, yeah, I told you so. Because I think there's a lot more people nowadays that are saying, yeah, this was a mistake than there was, whenever it all started off.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong. This Rashada situation is probably more boosters not delivering, right? You work in this pretty much daily in your job. This is probably boosters or a company not delivering, right?
Yes. The rumor is now. That being said, the requesting a release from his letter of intent. There are certain hardships, certain qualifiers that the NCAA allows for an athlete to be released from a signed legal document without penalty. There's decisions to be made at the university level, and then potentially decisions to be made at the NCAA level. I think a lawsuit could happen if one of those governing bodies doesn't grant that release, right?
That's what
Doesn't
I'm
decides to
fascinated.
stick up for themselves. I think that's when you have the trouble. But yes, as it's reported, again, we are not confirming, denying any of these rumors, adding to the rumors at all. We're just telling you what is out there and what we've done the best to make sense of. From what we can tell, the prevailing rumor is that the Florida Collective, whether I think it's the Gator Collective, I've forgotten, they have a couple, but one of them reportedly didn't even get close to the amount of money that they paid, whether that's a booster, a company, etc. They have overpromised, underdelivered, and Mr. and Mrs. Rashada are throwing a fit.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating to see if the NCAA rules that that's not a valid reason to get out of a national letter of intent.
Mhm.
It's gonna be fascinating because they, like you said, Mitch, they've largely just kind of thrown this to the wolves. And then
Mhm.
for them all of a sudden to say, actually, we do want to govern. Actually, we do want to have a say in some of these matters. Not all of them, but some of them. That's not going to fly with these big time programs that are trying to now balance player happiness, balance coach happiness, balance booster happiness, and having to work with all this. They don't want to have the NCAA breathing down their necks either, or just randomly poking their heads in when they feel like it's convenient, when it's not going to be a difficult battle for them. So, yeah, will it be the end of the NCAA, at least being the governing body of major college football? I don't know. That's been rumored for it seems like 20 years now that eventually the biggest schools are going to break away. It wouldn't shock me if that happened at some point, but I don't know. The NCAA's weathered quite a few storms and somehow they still find themselves on top of major college football. So who knows?
It's a fair point. I think this has potentially the legal firestorm that could surpass all previous battles. But we'll see. Like you said, the NCAA is kind of the South Park meme, right? I didn't hear no bell, so who knows what happens if they continue to just list in the wind haplessly. We'll see. Uh, Garrett, people have asked me what we thought about Bobby Petrino and about Jim Harbaugh's association with Michigan, maybe an NFL team. Hey, is he going to Denver? That's not on our podcast feed. Where can folks go to find that?
They can head over towards our YouTube. They can look over at the YouTube channel and they'll find all sorts of stuff over there.
Yeah, at 3Tech Pod on YouTube. Go check us out. Trey and I did a video on both of those topics. So if you'd like our thoughts, please head on over there. Leave us a comment on what you think. The other piece of news, though, that we are covering right here on your podcasting platform of choice is Garrett Riley going from TCU to Clemson. Now, TCU gets blown out in the national championship game, of course. You have 40 to 50 players leaving that roster, whether it's through the draft, whether it's through graduation or transfer. And most importantly, you're losing Max Duggan, the quarterback, who made all of this possible this season. And Garrett Riley, very understandably so, is cashing in on a historic season, a great job at the helm of this offense, and going to Clemson, where they just fired Brandon Streeter after 1 year as the OC there. Garrett Riley will take over. And now Garrett Riley, who is the hottest name in assistants around the land, he won the Broyles Award for the best college assistant this season, takes over an offense that is in real need of an identity. They have Cade Klubnik, who's the 5-star gunslinger from Austin Westlake here in Texas. But it's a team that doesn't really have any standout weapons out wide. I believe Will Shipley's coming back, and their offensive line is very solid. But the real question is, what can he do without big-time playmakers like Quentin Johnston and Tay Barber on the inside? Would love to know where you guys land on this. It seems like a home run hire for Clemson. I'm maybe not sold that he turns the whole ship around in 1 year, but what would you guys say to that?
I think there's going to be a pretty big jump in 1 year, and that just comes down to the fact that I think he runs the kind of offense that works in today's football. Obviously, I mean, TCU, story of college football this year. We're going to be talking about him for years. Apparently, Clemson, they were watching what happened in the national championship game, and they said, "Yeah, let me get a piece of that." But I don't know if that was exactly the thought process. Obviously, they had an awesome offense this year. They did some amazing things. Just weren't quite up to snuff with what Georgia's doing right now, obviously. But we broke that out on the previous pod. I do think this is going to be a really good move ultimately for Clemson. Obviously, they have the young quarterback, Cade Klubnik, who's going to be, the focal point of their program for the next couple of years at a minimum. They have some good young talent, like you were saying, around him. I think they're going to be able to be a little bit of a transfer destination just to be around that offense. And, maybe it's a little bit too late in this transfer window to see that happen. But I do think next transfer window, you see some guys maybe upset at their spring opportunities or the way coaches used them, or maybe they just want to get a little piece of that Clemson offense with Garrett Riley. I could see them maybe becoming a little bit of a transfer destination in that regard. I mean, you already kind of saw it at TCU. TCU was getting a lot of transfers coming in and some pretty high profile names. I'm thinking JoJo Earl and John Paul Richardson were the two big receivers that I saw that decided to make their way to Fort Worth. I kind of feel bad for them in terms of they probably came there with some idea that this was their situation they're getting into, and then all of a sudden, we'll find a new coach, I guess.
Right.
But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, Clemson needs something like this to kind of stay on top. We had already talked about it this last year. Maybe they were going to struggle to stay relevant. Obviously, that wasn't the case. They won their conference, but it wasn't as easy as it had been. And I think a lot of people, even around Clemson, would say, this wasn't a particularly strong ACC. This wasn't a very particularly strong conference this year. There were some teams we thought were going to do really well that did not do very well at all. And I think that especially in a year where you're going to see some of these programs surging, obviously Duke surging a little bit, Florida State having a fantastic year last year. They have a lot of players returning that they think they can, make another run. They're going to need to be better in a hurry to stay on top of the ACC and to stay relevant nationally. So I think that's a home run hire for them. Maybe year one, the program takes a minute to settle in. The offense takes a second to click. But with the amount of talent they have, and I think with Cade Klubnik at the helm, I think this could be a real slam dunk for them.
More than anything, I think it shows that Dabo realizes there's a big problem. That's been one of the critiques on him is he's really slow to make staff moves and really, really loyal to his guys. If they don't get hired away, I think this is the first time he's fired a coordinator at Clemson. A lot of that's been because they performed really well, but
Right.
there was a lot of questions on whether or not he would stay loyal to his guys and maybe have those guys that he's loyal to go down with a sinking ship in the Clemson offense. But credit to him for making a big change, making a splash hire. It definitely shows that he sees there's a problem, right? The Clemson offense of the last 2 years, obviously you don't have Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson, but you have the talent to have a serviceable offense. I don't think all of that can be explained away by not having a generational quarterback. Obviously, having a generational quarterback helps, but man, like the depths that offense had fallen to is just insane. And so having him make this move shows, to me at least, that he's serious about keeping the standard very, very high at Clemson, and he's not worried about loyalty like I think some in that fan base were starting to worry about.
I agree. Trying to keep the band together, trying to, I mean, I think there was, honestly, I think there was a little bit of a worry up there in Clemson that Dabo had a little Jerry Jones to him, that keeping the staff together, whether it was in good times or bad, would kind of put more of the responsibility for success on his shoulders. And whether or not that is true, I think this is a home run hire. Now, one thing that a lot of people are wondering, especially down here in the South and in Texas where we are, why would Garrett Riley consider going to Clemson and make that move when Texas A&M had reportedly been breathing down his neck for the past month? And Trey, you and I were texting about this earlier today. We really don't know that Garrett Riley ever truly considered going to A&M, and there's maybe a couple of very valid reasons for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an A&M fan that's just ticked off at this news, I know all of us really were excited about the possibility at one point of, a Garrett Riley coming to College Station. I know that's a big thing that the fan base was kicking around before Bobby Petrino was announced as the offensive coordinator. Some people even held out hope that that's why it took so long to announce a coordinator, was they were waiting for TCU to play in the national championship. But I mean, personally, if I'm Garrett Riley, and credit to Andy Staples for really laying this out in an awesome article on The Athletic. It's in his article where he's explaining why he thinks Petrino might be a pretty good hire for A&M, and why he checks a lot of boxes for the Aggie program. He really laid out how a guy like Garrett Riley, why would he hitch his wagon to Jimbo in a situation where if that goes south in a year, he's, lost pretty much all of his reputation. He is looked at as one of those coaches maybe that had one great year with a great quarterback in Max Duggan, but can't necessarily get it done in every other year. So going to a place like A&M was a huge, huge risk for Garrett Riley. Personally, if you're an A&M fan that's ticked off of this news or wondering why you couldn't money whip Garrett Riley or why you probably got outbid by Clemson, I don't think you did. I really don't think that Garrett Riley was interested in taking Jimbo's phone call, personally. And I think Andy Staples, in that article, Garrett Riley was the only one that he mentioned by name, the only other candidate that he mentioned by name. And he kind of casually threw him in there. And I think that's because he was kind of insinuating that, hey, A&M fans, I know this is someone in state that's torn it up this year. I know this is someone that you guys all wanted. It was never really going to happen. In my opinion, I think that's what he was insinuating. It makes a lot of sense, right? If you're Garrett Riley, go with Dabo right now. I think if you're trying to buy stock in a program, you'd rather buy stock in Clemson than A&M, unless you're
Right.
just really, really trying to buy low on A&M and you still believe. But the risk was just way too much for me if I'm Garrett Riley to go to A&M.
Well, I mean, realistically, what we just got finished talking about was the idea that Clemson was maybe in a little bit of a down year, maybe on their way down, and they put up a conference championship.
Exactly.
Like Dabo has way more skins on the wall than what Jimbo has right now. It's not even comparable in terms of what they have been able to accomplish: conference championships, national championships. Especially in the recent format, national championships. Jimbo just hadn't done that. And if we're talking about good fortune, whatever else, like, yeah, who cares if you can get players? Maybe the roster at A&M is better right now. I think according to the 24/7 composite, it is, but who cares what you're working with there? You want to hitch yourself to a guy who's going to go off and succeed. And he has more goodwill with the fan base right now. I mean, Dabo has plenty of goodwill with the Clemson fan base. He's bringing it back. I know he's been a little bit cringy. I don't know if he's going to go the route of the hey, Garrett Riley is the prodigal son we're bringing home just because he has to find a way to Jesus juke everything. But if that's what he's going to do, that's fine. That's Dabo. That's his personality. But I also just kind of think Dabo, he's got way more goodwill with that fan base. than what Jimbo currently has at A&M. And, there's rumors of this, rumors of that. You only got your class because you money whipped them $30 million, like we're talking about sliced bread. That's a lot of rumors and a lot of, just not necessarily 100% bona fide, positive, solid ground. And I think, if you're Garrett Riley, you're probably pretty smart to go ahead and say, I want to go to a national brand, but I want to go somewhere where it's solid. I think he would have made a move to a place like a Michigan or an Ohio State or an Alabama or Georgia, obviously, but like somewhere like that where it's a national brand. But yeah, they're going to be relevant. They're going to stay relevant. They're going to stay up there. We don't know what A&M has in them, right? They have the talent. They could certainly bounce back this year and with Petrino have a great year, but nothing guaranteed.
Clemson's on their way up. The ACC also way more wide open than the SEC West. Florida State is going to be the popular pick in the ACC this year. That's a pick that I will be backing. I'm pretty sure it's one that I've been advocating for a number of years now. Just give it time.
Credit to you for holding on to that penny stock there, because
that's right. That's right. My Knowles coin is through the roof right now, and I'm not selling, man. We've got diamond hands. All right, guys. Well, let's move into our way too early 2023 top 25 rankings. We all went through. We made our individual list. Trey, you compiled them in a consensus ranking. We'll run through them 5 teams at a time, and we're not going to spend a ton of time here. We can make a graphic for this to put out on social media. So, if you don't want to listen to all of it, fine. Go find the graphic and get the complete list there. But want to dive through this 5 teams at a time, just kind of cursory glance at what's a couple of these programs in each section might bring to the table. Guys, we have to start with the top 5. Georgia, of course, will be number 1, should be number 1 on everybody's board. They're number 1 on our board. You've got Michigan and Alabama that are tied for second in our rankings. Ohio State would come in at 4, and USC would come in at number 5. Garrett, give us just a very quick rationale for Georgia as number 1. They're the back-to-back defending champs, and it's really kind of number 1 until proven otherwise.
If you want rationale, turn on the tape from Monday night. They just spanked TCU in the national championship game. It probably would have been a spanking for anybody. I mean, they could have gone out there. We saw what they did to Michigan last year in the playoff. Obviously, Ohio State was a closer game where, they didn't target a lot of guys, didn't play a particularly good game. Kirby was pissed in the aftermath of a game that they won against a very good team in Ohio State. So, I think that the standard they set for this program is too high. The fact that he was able to convince his team that they were all picked to go 6-6 or 5-7 and somehow put a chip on the defending champion's shoulders. I mean, good job of coaching. I mean, he got his guys in his locker room to buy in. I don't know how he's going to do it this year, but you got a Georgia team who's bringing back their best player in Brock Bowers. They're bringing back plenty on the defensive side. They will be losing some, bona fide starters, but they did that last year, and they still repeated as champions.
Yeah.
Their next quarterback is going to be a guy who didn't start as a walk-on. That's not to trash Stetson Bennett, but the next quarterback will be more talented in terms of where they're starting their progression as a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia should be number 1 for the foreseeable future. I'll let them prove why they're not. For me, it's a number 1 until proven otherwise.
Well, and
go
ahead, Trey.
Mitch. Okay, well, if you have anybody other than Georgia in your number 1 spot in your way too early rankings, you're just going for clicks, and you're not being intellectually honest with yourself. That's all I have to say about Georgia.
No, I agree. They're an impressive team, offensively and defensively. I was just gonna say, what's the opposite of rat poison, right? Like Nick Saban talks about when the media kind of hypes them up and tells them, "Oh yeah, we're gonna win the national championship," or patting them on the back too hard. Apparently, Kirby Smart was going the other route, saying nobody believes in you guys. You lost 15 draft picks.
It motivates them.
Yeah, like what? I've never.
Well, and
never
he was super aggressive in his y'all heard the leaked pregame, I'm sure by now. That was, it had me ready to run through a brick wall. That was intense. I was sitting there like, oh yeah, sure, just play football. Just go through and I can't say all those words on this podcast, obviously, but it was just crazy the way that he was able to galvanize the team. Kirby's a heck of a coach. And I think you have to say until the talent level falls off, until they don't have something proven, until Kirby forgets how to coach, they're going to be up there at the top.
Michigan and Alabama are tied at second. I think right now, with so many players have decided to come back for Michigan, I think they're probably the more sure bet to be an elite team. And as crazy as that sounds to say it, Alabama will be looking for quite a bit. They're going to be looking for a whole lot on the defensive side of the ball. That secondary could be really young. Plus, they're looking for their new quarterback and running back one. Jahmyr Gibbs is gone as well. So just a lot to replace for Alabama. And for the first time in a long time, guys, I don't know that Alabama has that QB1 that's just ready in the pipeline. We saw Jalen Milroe play this season. He's not the typical quarterback that Alabama has grown used to seeing. So it'll be interesting to see what the Crimson Tide produce in 2023. Ohio State checks in at number 4. USC checks in at number 5. Both teams have explosive offenses, even though Ohio State will be also looking for a new quarterback one. Our concern for both of those teams and what we feel like might limit their ceiling, though, on the defensive side of the ball. Trey, both of these teams have shown the proclivity to put up 70 points in a game, but it's hard to win a national championship if you can't stop the opposition.
Yeah, and I think, Lincoln Riley has really hitched his wagon to Alex Grinch, and I know how you feel about that, Mitch.
It's a tough
But
decision.
and you look at Ohio State, I think they have at least the scheme in place to really be solid on defense, and I think they'll take a huge step forward next year in defense as they get more used to that bowl scheme. But yeah, I don't know. USC really, really, that Cotton Bowl really has me down on them. I think like
Yeah.
Mitch, you and I saw them in person, and just Tulane got whatever they wanted. They averaged like 10 yards a play over the course of that whole game, and it was just like that's an American athletic team. And granted, they're playing like their Super Bowl, but come on, guys, like we can't figure out a way to hold them under an average of a first down per play over the course of that second half. So I don't know, like USC, all the talent in the world on offense, they're going to light up the scoreboard again, and it's probably going to get them back to the Pac-12 championship game. But just like we saw with Lincoln at Oklahoma, the ceiling after that is probably pretty low.
Well, to your point, Trey, Tulane not exactly lighting up the scoreboard in terms of their passing numbers in that game. I think their quarterback had like 4 completions going into the last drive of the game or something like that. It was
running it right down their throats.
Yeah, just run the dang ball. They knew it was coming to them. They just couldn't stop it. So they're going to have to find a way to play a lot better. I will say for Ohio State, I am a little bit more optimistic on their defensive side. I think I saw Eichenberg is coming back for them. So that's going to be a big return for them. For me, for Ohio State, I want to put them up at the top because we saw how competitive they were with Georgia. Who's your quarterback? Right? That's my big question right now is who's your quarterback? Cedar hasn't officially declared. That's coming, obviously. We all know that he's going to be a top 5 pick. Probably deserves to be top 3, but I just think the way that the draft board falls, probably not. And they have that. Their offensive line is going to have some question marks. Obviously, plenty talented wide receivers. I'm just a little bit more concerned on how their offense is going to get clicking to start the year and maybe just see some of those early games, how they mesh together and if they can get the ball rolling quick enough for them to do that. So very talented team, just can't justify putting them higher right now.
Florida State checks in at number 6, Oregon at 7, Penn State at 8, Utah at 9, and Tennessee at 10. Now, guys, I am very, very high on Florida State. I've already tipped that. I think they're going to be my pick to win the ACC conference championship game, really have a chance to make a college football playoff. And yet, I think both of you guys had them ranked higher than I did. That's why they check in at 6 on our consensus ranking. They've got a ton coming back. Jordan Travis coming back. Jared Verse, the All-American edge rusher, just declared that he's actually not going to the draft. He's going to come back for another year. He was a top 20 player on a lot of draft experts' big boards, getting ready to kind of follow in the footsteps of the edge rusher from last year. And I'm blanking on his last name, Jermaine, Georgia transfer. I'll find it in a second.
Yeah, no, it's
essentially, just the same story run right back. And yet Verse is coming back. That ACC is wide open. I think Florida State really has a chance to win 10, 11 games and get to Charlotte to play in that conference championship game. you guys are also really high on Penn State, and there's a case to be made that if Michigan and Ohio State trip at all, you could see a scenario when Penn State makes it to Indianapolis. Garrett, talk through Penn State, what they're bringing in, especially with a new quarterback and Drew Aller taking over.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the first place I start is they have probably one of the best running back tandems coming back in the whole country. I mean, they were already so good in the running back room this year. We saw what they did in the Rose Bowl against Utah. I mean, they are plenty talented, but they're bringing back Drew Aller as their quarterback, and he had some pretty significant reps this year. He played a decent amount and looked fantastic doing it. I mean, he's a good quarterback, and bringing back any amount of experience is always a good thing to bring back for quarterback. But when you look around at the Big Ten, you kind of think, okay, well, what were we saying this year about the Big Ten? You know, how some teams were built. We talked about Michigan being built to beat, Ohio State, and that ended up, coming to fruition. We said they're built to run the ball. They're built to be physical. They play good defense, right? They know how to kind of possess. They're kind of the antithesis to what Ohio State wants to do. That's going to be true for Penn State this next year. And I think the big difference is I think their quarterback situation is going to be a little bit better. I do like McCarthy at Michigan, but I think Aller is more talented, and I think he has a higher ceiling. And I think that if they can figure out some talent on the outside with their receivers, if they can figure out how to get a couple guys in there who I think can be difference makers, watch out, man. Penn State, they could really do something next year.
Well, and I think just the way that the Big Ten, I mean, we joke about it with Michigan and Ohio State all the time, but their floor is probably 9 wins, right? And in any given year, I know that their
Right.
big non-conference game last year was Auburn. I can't remember off the top of my head if they have a big one this year against a difficult team, but yeah, their floor is probably 9 wins, and anytime that's your floor, it's probably going to make me rank you pretty high. I feel a little dirty doing it because I've just never impressed with the way that Penn State gets to their gaudy records, but hey, they're going to get there, so you might as well start them high, right?
Their big out of conference is West Virginia this year.
There you go. Their floor
So,
is probably 10
know,
wins then, and if they steal one from Michigan or Ohio State, it's just gravy.
yeah.
It feels like their floor is the Rose Bowl again, right? I mean, if they're not making the college football playoff, the Rose Bowl is a very real possibility. Basically, well, I say basically every year we're going to a 12-team format in 2024. But if we were to stay in this format, it would be the Rose Bowl. Right now, with how they're directing traffic out there in Happy Valley, I think they're an at-large bid contender every single year. And
Absolutely.
if you're Penn State and James Franklin, especially considering the fact that you share a division with two of the top 5 teams on an annual basis in college football, it's a pretty good place to be sitting. LSU checks in at 11. We've got Washington at 12, Notre Dame at 13, TCU all the way down at 14, and Clemson comes in at 15. I think it's pretty clear why we've placed TCU all the way down there at 14. I talked about this off the top of the show. They are losing half their roster, including QB1, and now an offensive coordinator. Year 2 under Sonny Dykes is going to be a prove it campaign to kind of show the nation, hey, this wasn't just a fluke. This wasn't a Disney story. TCU has legitimate staying power. What I'm really interested in is Washington sitting at number 12 and Notre Dame sitting at 13. Both teams have really good quarterbacks in 2023. Michael Penix Jr. is coming back for Washington. He was FBS's leader in passing yards this season. Plus, that defense was sneaky good. They were only kept out of the Pac 12 championship game by virtue of a tiebreaker. I think 2022 could be the year of the Husky. I don't know if I'm too high on them or not, but tell you what, the purple and gold's looking pretty good this next season.
We could have a full-on Pac-12 renaissance next year. We're talking USC, Oregon, Washington. I personally don't think UCLA is going to take too big of a step back. And you got so many other storylines like Oregon State, Colorado with Coach Prime. Like, we're going to have to stay up past our bedtime a little bit, fellas. Like,
Sure.
it's going to be some interesting football out west next year. Washington's going to be right at the center of that, though. I would not be shocked at all if they're right in the middle of the playoff discussion. As we go into November and late November, I'd be really, really surprised if they're not in that discussion, frankly, because Michael Penix Jr. has a chance to be one of, if not the best quarterbacks in college football next year. If you're talking about looking for someone to carry their team like Max Duggan did, that could be Michael Penix Jr. next year.
Yeah, some hurdles to overcome for sure, but I mean, you have your returning quarterback. He's plenty talented, and they've already proven that they can beat some of these teams. They were plenty competitive this year, like you were saying, Mitch. They just didn't get the tiebreaker. So, I think a little bit of a better luck, a little bit, let the ball bounce a little bit different for you, and we could have seen, an actual, I mean, dare we say, like if Washington pulled this off, we could have gotten Washington in the Rose Bowl this year, if they had found a way to their championship game and then won. So, I think, Washington has a real chance to do something special next year. Maybe a little bit of question marks as far as the talent around Penix and some of the playmakers around him, and if they'll be able to keep things up for another year. But lots to be excited about for sure.
They've got their top receiver coming back, so he's going to have his favorite weapon. And that defense, again, I really think they were kind of
It's a good defense.
unsung heroes of this past season. Year one under Kalen DeBoer was a resounding success. I'm excited to see if he can avoid that sophomore slump in year two. Notre
I got a
Dame should
question
be.
about this group real quick. I don't know if you're about to move on, Mitch, but I think we might have Clemson a little bit too low. Now that their offense might get sorted, I personally would probably put them a little bit higher. Where do you guys stand on that?
I think they're kind of appropriately ranked. I mean, look, that team couldn't do anything this year. It was Will Shipley or bust. And look, as talented as Cade Klubnik is, he's got to earn it. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not in we should not be in the business. The industry is, but we should not be in the business of just handing accolades, handing rankings out because you have a certain amount of stars next to your name. I mean, look, it's not fair to judge Cade off of what happened this year because he came in some tough circumstances. He obviously his only start comes in the Orange Bowl when they kind of get manhandled by Tennessee. So I don't think that's an appropriate sample size to judge him positively or negatively. And so for me, I look at a team that is way more talented than the vast majority of college football. They probably have a top 10 roster. That being said, though, they've got to earn their ranking. So, for me, I pushed them down my board just because I was not impressed with what that team did. That defense was not nearly as good as what we were told it was going to be at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, well, and there's a reason why this is a way too early ranking. Obviously,
Right.
depending on what they do in the transfer portal now that Garrett Riley's there, I could see this being a big deal for them. Right, you get a couple big transfer wide receivers to go with Cade Klubnik and Shipley back there, and all of a sudden you got an offense that's humming and new scheme and everything else, and it doesn't matter that the defense wasn't that good; they're going to score 50 every game. I have no idea how it's going to work out for them. I think right now, based on what we saw, based on some real optimism for next year, I think that 15 is just fine for them.
Mhm.
I might be tempted to scoot them up a little bit just because of the coach, and I do think we will see a bump and some surge there. But right now there's nothing set in stone, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I wouldn't move him into the top 10 or anything, but maybe
No,
just a little bit of a bump up.
And I'm sure Clemson will get plenty of a bump. Again, like Garrett said, way too early top 25 top 25 for 2023. This will change probably a million times going forward into the season, but rest assured, Clemson, I would be shocked if, according to the media poll, the AP, whoever, Clemson's not a top 10 team heading into next year, right? I mean, they're a brand name. The hype around them is real.
yeah,
The AP doesn't watch college football anyway, so they rank it by brand. And
yeah, and they're going to need top 10 matchups for TV and everything else. So yeah.
Notre Dame should also be kind of spicy as well. Scott Hartman. Sam Hartman.
Sam Hartman, yeah.
I don't know why I want to call him Scott. Sam Hartman is now the quarterback at Notre Dame. I think he's really going to elevate what they can do on offense. 16, and I was delighted to see this team check in at number 16. The little old Texas Tech Red Raiders, baby. Joey Mack got the guns up out in West Texas. They check in at number 16. Wisconsin and Oregon State tie at 17 in our consensus rankings. Texas comes in at 19, and Kansas State is at number 20. I mean, raise your hand if you want to talk about the Red Raiders. I love what's going on in West Texas, and there is a staying power vibe inside the top 25 to what Joey McGuire is doing out there down I-30.
Yeah, this is a full-on vibe ranking because the vibes are immaculate in Lubbock right now. And
Yep.
yeah, you're right. I think it has staying power, especially as we transition into, as we've talked about, the wild and wacky new Big 12 that we're going to see. We still don't have a conference schedule out for the Big 12 yet for next year. So it's kind of hard to rank these teams because we don't even know who they're playing for the
Right.
vast majority of their schedule. But, you know, if I can make a bold claim, my first bold claim of the offseason, Texas Tech's going to be in Arlington next December, y'all. They're going to be one of the top two
Whoa.
teams
Hey
in the
now. Hey
conference,
now.
and they're going to take advantage of some teams that are kind of starting to trend down a little bit. I don't think Oklahoma State's going to be as good next year. Don't think Kansas State's going to be as good next year. You guys disagree with me on that one, but I think TCU is going to take a big step back. Texas, who knows if they can get it together. Give me that consistency, man. I'm going to take Texas Tech
Yeah.
right now on January 12th, 2023. In 11 months, they will be playing a football game in Arlington for a Big 12 title.
Well, I mean, the last that we saw these guys, they were lighting up, Lane Kiffin and his squad down in Houston. So,
They were.
that's not a bad football team that they're playing against, but they played pretty physical on defense. Obviously, the special teams touchdown was kind of fun to watch too. But yeah, this is just a good football team. It's a lot of fun to watch them, and they came up with some big upsets this year. They had some inconsistency with the quarterback and injuries and up and down, or else they might have had a little bit of a better year this year too. But I'm excited to see what they can do with some consistency at quarterback and maybe get some more talent in there and see what they can do.
Now, it is worth noting that if some of you are listening to this, you maybe bleed a certain color of orange and you're going, how in the world is Texas Tech ranked ahead of the Longhorns of Texas?
They
Uh,
beat you this year. So
w- they-
why are you asking that
well,
question?
listen, we don't ever criticize people for asking questions. As one teacher so eloquently put it, there are no dumb questions, just dumb people. And so I think one of y'all didn't have Texas ranked. Raise your hand if that was you.
It wasn't me. I had him ranked 19th.
I thought, yeah, I'd rank 21.
Okay. Maybe I just missed it. I thought one of y'all didn't have them ranked. I think Texas is going to be the best team in the Big 12 next season, and that is a huge roll of the dice. And I'll tell you what, if you're Texas fans, you hate that I'm saying that because I can't figure out the Longhorns on a week to week basis. Against the spread, it feels like I've picked Texas correctly once in the last 3 seasons. I mean, whenever I expect you to win, you lose. When I expect you to finally, okay, this is the time when nope, they're not going to hang around and win, you win by 14. So I do expect Texas to take a step forward. I just think they have too much talent to not. I really believe that eventually the talent and the offensive game plan is just going to be too much for them to stay out of Arlington. That defense is getting a lot better. Pete Kwiatkowski, listen, a lot of people complain about him on a week to week basis, but that defense is trending in the right direction. I will say, very interesting to see what happens offensively now that Brandon Marion, the passing game coordinator, left Texas. He went out to UNLV when Bobby Petrino came to Texas A&M to take that offensive coordinator spot. So the Longhorns replacing, yes, a support staff member, but talk to people who are intimately familiar with that program and look at the players' reactions when he left to take the job with the running Rebs. A lot of disappointment. So that is a loss that they have to field. I'm still high on the Longhorns as we sit here in mid-January.
See, I agree with almost everything you just said. My only concerns with Texas for this next year, right? I think they have good guys in place, talent, all that stuff like that. How the heck you going to place, or how the heck you going to replace Bijan Robinson?
Sure.
That's not a small thing. That's not, we're not going to act like, a freshman 5-star is going to come in and be exactly who Bijan was, right?
Mhm.
That's not realistic. He's plenty talented. Baxter, I think is his name,
Yeah,
but
Cedric.
he's plenty talented, and he may even start at some point this season. I don't think it's fair to expect him to be Bijan Robinson. He was so much of their offense this year. So much of their offense ran through him. And I just don't think it's realistic to expect that. And I don't know who Quinn Ewers is. And he may not be the guy that ends up playing. Maybe, the other perfectly rated high school kid is, the guy who's going to come in and save the day. It kind of seems like we do this talk every year with Texas is, well, no, but this new quarterback is going to be the savior. So I'll wait and see until I think that they fix the quarterback position. I'm not entirely sure that they have yet. Look, Quinn can play. He can win. He's plenty good. I don't know which Quinn I'm getting every week. He hasn't been consistent, and I just I think I need to see him be good on a week in and week out basis before I can bump them up any higher.
Yeah, Sark hasn't earned a preseason top 15 ranking in my book. He, as a coach, has not earned that, especially at Texas. So until he shows me that he can translate that talent, and you could say the same thing about the last three coaches at Texas. When you show that you can take all the talent advantages that you have in the Big 12 and convert it to wins, I will rank you higher in my preseason top 25. But we have not done that since Mac Brown was roaming the sidelines consistently.
Wisconsin might throw for all the yards this year as they
I'm so
transition.
excited about Wisconsin this year,
Yeah,
y'all. Like,
as they transition to the air raid, they've gotten 3 transfer quarterbacks in the past 2 weeks. They also just got C.J. Williams, who transfers from USC, the wide receiver, talented wide receiver that we watched play in Arlington. That offense under Phil Longo is about to get really, really fun. Oregon State as well. DJ Uiagalelei takes over at QB1. What does he do up in Corvallis? How does that defense continue to progress? Jonathan Smith's got that boat pointed in the right direction as well.
did y'all see Braylon Allen's tweet today? He said he was so excited to not run into 9-man boxes anymore. And I just love that for him. Like, he is so excited to be playing
Yeah,
this new offense.
he can play modern football.
Yeah, and I think, he's such a Wisconsin style running back. But the fact that he's excited to play in an air raid offense and he didn't transfer, right? Like, he
No,
was in
Yeah,
the transfer portal, then took his name out, and he's excited to come back and play in a new look offense. I think I'm super excited about Wisconsin.
Final five: South Carolina, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and UTSA. Meep meep. UTSA comes in at number 25 for us. Now, y'all are higher on South Carolina than I am. In fact, in my rankings, I do not have them ranked. I have them as one of the teams that just missed, and they're a little bit farther down even that list that I wrote out. The case against the Gamecocks has nothing to do with the coaching staff, has nothing to do with Shane Beamer, has nothing to do with the support staff around him. It's the fact that everybody's transferred out, other than Spencer Rattler, who has decided that he's coming back. I think he decided that yesterday formally. Everybody else, it seems like, is making a mass exodus for Columbia. And for the life of me, I can't figure it out. It seems like the culture there is really good. They had a very good season. They way overperformed a lot of people's expectations. They beat Texas A&M for the first time ever. They beat Clemson and steal their playoff bid. They did so many good things outside of finishing that bowl game against Notre Dame, and yet it's been truly a rush to the portal. Jordan Birch is probably the highest profile player, former 5-star edge rusher who just committed to Oregon. I'd love to hear from you guys. What keeps the Gamecocks so high in your rankings?
the reason I think they deserve to be up there is because all these players who we were talking about were not names last year. Their coaches got the best out of their players. They knew how to win with their guys, right? And I'm sure that they're going to get some transfers in. I'm sure that they're going to get some guys who want to come play for the system. And for whatever it is, they know how to get their guys ready for a Saturday of football, right? They come out hot. You mentioned they beat A&M for the first time ever. They came out, returned the kick for a touchdown, and then a couple plays later they kick it off, and there's an interception return that gets down to the 10, and they kick that one, and then there's another one that gets fumbled, and then they look up, it's 17-0 in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready to play. I mean, they put up just 66, I think was the number they put up on Tennessee, like something absurd like that. They know how to play the game, and with Spencer Rattler coming back, you get experience at quarterback. I'm not the biggest Spencer Rattler fan. I don't think he's necessarily prolific, but you get experience coming back at quarterback and plenty of arm talent. I will take that, 9 times out of 10 if I'm a college program.
Yeah, and all Shane Beamer's done since he's got to Columbia is exceed expectations, right? He goes to a bowl game and wins it in year one when they were expected to win, I think, like 3 games. And then this year they took a huge step forward, winning as much as they did this year. So I think year 3 of Shane Beamer could be really exciting in Columbia. They do, as always, have a tough schedule. And the SEC East is getting tougher by the year, but I think they're firmly solidified in that number 3 spot. And depending on how Joe Milton looks at Tennessee and how that defense evolves in 2023, they could challenge for that number 2 spot behind Georgia. I mean, they beat Tennessee this year, and I don't think that it's out of the question to see them do that again.
You've got North Carolina at 22 in our consensus rankings. Drake May is going to throw for a lot of yards. We'll see what that defense looks like. They lost a couple of transfers. I think they lost their top 3 cornerbacks from this
Yeah,
past
something like that.
roster.
Might
So
be
there's
addition by subtraction if you look at the stats this year.
yeah, well, yeah, they've got a lot to figure out there in Chapel Hill. The Mississippi schools, Ole Miss, Miss State, check in. As I mentioned, tied for 23rd. I think again, both of those offenses should be really good. Will Rogers is coming back for Mississippi State. What does Ole Miss get out of Jackson Dart? Is that passing game going to be any more lethal? It was really the running game that got the Rebs through the first half of that season before they just collapsed down the stretch. And my biggest question, does Lane Kiffin get the most out of his team for 12 games plus whatever postseason they might be in? Because, through the first 8 weeks, this team looked like a real SEC West contender, and then they just wet the bed. I mean, you watched as adversity hit them on the field, their players quit on and off the field. And it was not a good look for Lane Kiffin, who can't stay off Twitter. So, I've got them ranked in my top 25 because I think they're a top 25 talented team right now. I'm curious to see how this team and this roster comes together for 2023. But, there are certain programs that you just kind of discount and you're not willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Ole Miss is one of those programs for me because, my goodness, like when things go south, it goes south. And I say Ole Miss. Any program that Lane Kiffin is the head coach of, it just happens to be Ole Miss. When things go south, it goes south in a hurry.
Well, and my big question for Ole Miss just has to do with Quinshon Judkins and what's going to happen now that teams are going to spend an entire offseason figuring out how to key in on him and
Sure.
what they want to do with him. I think he's plenty talented to stay good. Can he repeat his numbers? That's a big question for me.
Yeah, I do not have Ole Miss in my preseason way too early top 25 because, yeah, like you said, Mitch, I'm just not confident in Lane Kiffin's ability to close out a season. So I'm looking at all the teams I could have put them in over the back end of my top 25. I had UCLA, Oregon State, and UTSA, and I like those teams' ability to close out over the back half of the season more than Ole Miss right now.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
Yeah.
UTSA checks in at number 25. Frank the Tank is back. Excited to see what Frank Harris can do in San Antonio. A couple of names that we left off our list that did not make it in the consensus rankings for me. Iowa checks in at number 21 in my rankings. And I'll tell you why. Caden McNamara is not going to light the world on fire. But guys, all Iowa has to do is score more than 14 points a game and they win. That's not that much of an asking price. And I think that McNamara, with a decent running game, can get there. That defense is going to stay very, very solid. So, look, laugh at the Hawkeyes and their generationally poor offense all you want. I think there's a lot of legitimacy behind this team because it's so dependent on the defense. All you need is a quarterback to run whatever Brian Ferentz calls his offense. And I think that they can be a top 25 team. Does that really mean that they're one of the best total teams in the country? No, but they're going to win football games if they can put that together. We did
Mitch
not
is
rank
picking Iowa as a darling in 2023. Just gonna
well, listen. We'll look at some literature. All right, we'll see where the over under comes in, and we'll see.
Look, there's something to be said for a quarterback who's started a playoff game.
Yeah,
it's fair. It's very fair. It's very fair. So I'm
didn't bet too well. Don't look at the stat line, but he started a playoff
He
game.
made it there. Hey, he made it there. He's got the LinkedIn badge to prove it. Tulane. Now, I know this was a Cinderella season, and they're losing a lot. Tajay Spears gone to the NFL. That's huge. They return Michael Pratt, their quarterback, plus 8 other All-American players, All-American Conference players. I think that's worth something in the AAC. I think it's really going to take them a long way. Will it be another Cotton Bowl year? Probably not. The numbers don't favor them, but I think we got to give them just a little bit of respect. Personally, teams that just missed in my personal rankings: Mississippi State, UCLA, North Carolina State, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Any other teams other than those that missed your personal top 25 rankings?
I'll throw one in that I had in my preseason or my top 20 that didn't make our consensus. NC State, man.
Yeah.
I think, Brennan Armstrong is going to transfer in from Virginia. Brennan Armstrong is going to get to play with a defense on the other side of the ball for the first time. NC State is bringing back yet again a lot of talent on
Yeah.
defense. So their defense isn't going anywhere. That led them. I know they had a disappointing season with all the injuries to Devin Leary and a couple other key guys, but the Wolfpack, I'm not as high on them as I was this past offseason where I thought they could win the ACC and maybe sneak into the playoff. But
Yep.
yeah, I think they're still going to have a really solid season in 2023.
Yeah, a couple teams that I think, and this is going to sound weird to say, but how about Duke and Kansas? How about just a couple teams that I think have a real chance? Obviously, Kansas, the wheels kind of came off towards the end of the season, but they still played a heck of a bowl game against Arkansas. Played a really, really good competitive game there. They got a lot of pieces coming back, and I think a more serious candidate, Duke. They got everything coming back. Just about. They haven't lost a whole bunch. Their quarterback Riley Leonard, obviously, he was the leader in or I think it was the second most rushing touchdowns from a quarterback this year. They can score plenty fine. Elko did a great job this year. I'm really curious to see what they can do. That ACC is wide open. Everyone wants to talk about these other teams. Why not Duke?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's fair. Notable teams that missed our top 25 when you look back at rankings from a season ago: Texas A&M, Arkansas, Miami, all nowhere to be seen in the consensus rankings. Trey, I know you think that there's a case to be made that Texas A&M can be a fringe top 25 team. Garrett and I maybe want to see them win a game or two to start the season, but I think the fact that really you can have a discussion about Texas A&M, you can have a discussion about Miami. I don't think you can have a discussion about Arkansas. Not only did they underperform this season, they lost so much in
Mm-hmm.
the transfer portal as well. Sure, they've got KJ Jefferson coming back for his 11th season as a college football player, but defensively, that defense did not achieve expectations. And I
no.
think there's a whole lot of questions about what Kendall Briles can do in this offense in 2023. He got a little bit predictable, to be quite honest, down the stretch, and it's how a lot of teams ended up beating them. It's just fascinating to watch how this sport turns over from year to year.
Yeah. Arkansas is going to be an interesting case study next year because Sam Pittman's one of those guys that had one really, really good year, and we're still kind of waiting for that encore performance. And even that really good year was kind of ballooned up by some early season wins against teams that didn't pan out to what we thought they were. He beat Texas and A&M in 2021, and neither team really looked elite by the end of the season. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting year for Sam Pittman. I think it could be a career in Fayetteville defining year for Sam Pittman. If he can bounce back, get them to 8 or 9 wins, and I think all of a sudden you're really looking towards a bright future for him in Fayetteville. If it's another 6-6 or 7-5 year, I think you start to see some people start asking some questions.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, they're going to have to figure out how to be a little bit more creative on the offensive side as well, beside just quarterback plunge with the five wide set. It's when you're running quarterback plunge with a jump from the 3 yard line, I mean, figure something else out on the offensive side. The game has evolved.
KJ Jefferson is really fun to watch, but I don't think I
He
want the
is.
ball in, I don't think I want the ball in his hands if I'm down 7 in the fourth quarter. I think there's about
Yeah.
20 guys in college football at least that I would pick over him.
Yeah, probably more than that even. I mean, he's fine, but I mean, there's a reason that bowl game got so fun, and it's just because Kansas came back and he couldn't keep the ball moving long enough to keep the points up. I mean, what did they score, like 50 unanswered points? I mean, obviously it wasn't that many, but it was a whole bunch of unanswered points in that bowl game, and I think that has a lot to do with the lack of offensive production for guys like KJ Jefferson in Arkansas. And there's, I mean, no case in my mind to be had for either A&M or Miami. Loads of hype, loads of NIL. You can bring in players. You can do whatever you want to do. Can't win games for some reason. Just, prove to me that either of these teams can win games, and then we can start talking about, preseason expectations or, making a bowl game or something like that.
Well, guys, we've got 7 more months at least to rehash, relist everything that we've talked about tonight. I'm excited for it. We got a lot of content planned coming in this off season. Let us know if there are segment ideas, if there are aspects of your team that you would like covered. If you got questions for us, you can always DM us at 3TechPod, Instagram, Twitter, over on YouTube as well. That's where you'll find all of this content and more uploaded to on a daily basis. For Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about